traumatic experiences that you lived through as a child, the more likely you are to develop mental but also physical illness as an adult. I'm Dr. Jessica Eastman, and this is an open Q&A. And everyone who's present to please join us by turning on your videos. So the first question says, I just want to know, what is a trauma? Is it limited to physical abuse? Definitely not limited to physical abuse. There are a lot of different definitions of trauma, depending on what you are talking about. I think personally, my definition of trauma is when someone's either real or perceived safety is threatened, which could mean like their physical life is in danger. But what's a really important thing to understand about trauma is that it very often has to do with safety in connection. So whether that's remaining in connection with your caregivers, your parents, perhaps, remaining in connection with your tribe, like the people that you feel connected to, whether culturally or like from a shared experiences perspective, demographically, right? Like, when we look at the evolutionary experiences of trauma, it was threats like a predator, illness, famine, or disconnection from the tribe. And so when we apply that to modern day, we have to think about all of those very real components of potential threats to safety. So the same would apply here, like attacks by a predator or whomever, whether like intentional or not. So I'm thinking here like, an intentional attack versus like a natural disaster or a war. It's not specific to you necessarily, but both threats to your physical safety. Illness can absolutely be traumatic. Lack of access to food or shelter or, other basic human needs can be a traumatic experience. But so much of what shows up in adults in their work to try and heal from the things that are plaguing them or challenging them is disconnection from emotional mental safety. So this is, like emotional abuse or denial of their experience or their emotional needs or their feelings. The one way to think about it is there are traumas that add things to your life that shouldn't have been there, like physical abuse, war, things like that. Emotional abuse, even like yelling, shouting, being bullied, that kind of thing. And then there are traumas that take things away that should have been there, right? So that could be like, a lack of food, a lack of shelter, but that could also be emotional neglect or physical neglect. Like maybe you had a home, but your parents weren't really there to take care of you. There was nobody to go to when you were not feeling well or when you were feeling scared. If you want, there's a lot of layers to this, but I think one of the most important parts is that at our core, human beings are very resilient. And it also doesn't mean that anytime any single individual experiences any of the things that I listed, they are going to end up traumatized, either practically or very literally developing PTSD or complex PTSD. So what it actually is the combination of those threats to our safety, whether physical or emotional, and an inadequate opportunity, time, safety, space to be able to process and deal with and get support around the event. When we look at the research in trauma, we see the differences between like, why did two people who lived through the same car accident, one has PTSD and one doesn't? And the typical differentiating factors is one of those people had, people in their lives that they could turn to for support, people who would listen to them, people who would help them care for themselves. Maybe they had resources like money to be able to pay for therapy or to take time off work to recover both physically and mentally. And maybe the other person didn't have access to those same support systems or resources. And so a lot of trauma is actually secondary to a lack of support systems or resources, right? And this is really important when we look at sociocultural impacts of trauma, right? Like maybe you had a perfect childhood and your parents were delightful and really kind and very emotionally aware, but you grew up really poor and you didn't have access to the things that you would have needed to help you manage the trauma that you experienced as a child. If you want to learn more about this, this is definitely not the exclusive sole definition of trauma, but you can look into the ACE study. I will type it into the chat here. ACE is an acronym that stands for Adverse Childhood events. It's a really interesting study that talks about more childhood traumatic experiences that you lived through as a child, the more likely you are to develop mental but also physical illness as an adult. And there are, I believe, 10 different ACEs that they list in that study. It's, again, not the exclusive definition of trauma, but it gives you a good idea. It's some of the ones that are maybe not as evident there is like, a parent with an addiction, a parent who was in jail, that kind of, a parent with a mental illness, that kind of thing. Doesn't necessarily guarantee you experience trauma, but it increases the likelihood. If you want to learn more about trauma, just like in general, in terms of how it shows up, how it changes our brain, how it impacts our bodies, one of the most powerful books you can read on this is called The Body Keeps the Score. I'm going to type that into the chat as well. It's by Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who's a researcher from the States. It's an incredible book, and it really illuminates a lot of the impacts of trauma on our whole being. And it also talks a lot about therapies and ways to start treating it.
Whenever you're ready, here are 4 ways that Porn Reboot can help you out for free. The first way is to subscribe to our channel and make sure that you click on the notification bell to get a new video every other day. The second way is to actually get a free copy of my book, Confessions of a Porn Addict, 7 Secrets of Porn-Free Men, where you'll learn about my personal struggle and the lessons I learned over the past 14 years, as well as get strategies for putting together your own personalized reboot plan and ending your compulsive behavior with pornography or masturbation. So click on the link in the description below this video to get the free ebook. And thirdly, if you're not sure where you'd like to start, but you'd like to learn more about my team and I, or you'd like to spend time with more like-minded professionals like entrepreneurs, business owners, men who work in sales or consulting or high-level jobs, men who are controlling their behavior, then join our free and confidential group, the Porn Reboot group on Facebook. There's also a link to join the group in the description below this video. And finally, if you need our help right now because you have a burning issue, it's an emergency. Your behavior with pornography is hurting you mentally. You're about to lose your relationship and you want to live up to your potential or be an authentic man and free yourself from shame, guilt, and underachieving, then click on the link in the description below this video that actually says free coaching call, or visit elevatedrecovery.org and click on the link which says book a call.